Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Well, Brian Walsh surprised a lot of people, definitely including me, by pleading guilty to two of the charges in this case. But what he did not plead guilty to is the part that really matters. And that raises the question, are we actually headed toward a full fledged murder trial on December 1st? Or was that just the first step in trying to negotiate a plea deal? There are strong arguments on both sides. So tonight, we're going to break down the two possible paths forward and why each side might want a plea, why they might refuse it, why they might not want it, and what this move really tells us about where Brian Walsh's case is going. Now, for those of you who are just diving into this case, Ana Walsh disappeared from her Massachusetts home on New Year's, well, somewhere between New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, 2023. Brian was her husband, and he told police she left early for work. And she took a ride share to the airport where she was headed back to Washington, D.C. for work. But investigators quickly concluded that his story did not match what they were seeing. They were looking at surveillance, they were looking at digital searches, even what they found in the Walsh basement. Prosecutors alleged that what really happened is that Brian killed Ana and then spent days disposing of the evidence in order to cover up what he had done. Now, Ana's body has never been found. The fact that such a critical piece of evidence is missing is now playing a major role in how the rest of the case is going to unfold. So earlier this week, Brian Walsh dropped a bombshell by pleading guilty to two of the charges against him. And frankly, they were very surprising what he pled guilty to. He agreed that he had lied to investigators. That's a deadly thing to agree to because it automatically undermines your credibility. And then he also agreed that he improperly handled Ana's remains. Both of those are very serious felonies. And in fact, together they're punishable by up to 23 years in prison. And Brian has admitted to those, but he did not admit to the biggest charge of all, which is the murder of his wife, Ana. And actually, he wasn't even allowed to under Massachusetts law. So he is headed now to trial unless he can get the prosecutors to agree to a deal. He can't just all by himself plead guilty and just say, yep, I admit it, judge, have mercy on me. It has to go differently than that. But just how exactly the trial is going to shake out now that we are in the bizarre posture of him having admitted to lying to the police and disposing of her remains, but denying that he killed her, it's a really strange posture for the case. So by pleading guilty, Brian shut off a lot of options for himself. I mean, he can't argue complete innocence anymore. He can't say, for example, what was being said in the Michelle Troconis case, which is maybe he can't say Ana's still alive and she ran off somewhere, couldn't handle life, headed out. So Brian Walsh is running out of options now. And that makes coming to trial a mystery in a whole lot of ways. The plea was not the end of the case. It had been just sort of the opening move in the biggest game, if you'll call it that, of all, which is the trial itself. Now, Walsh shifted the legal dynamics very dramatically, and now the parties can go one of two directions, towards trial or into negotiations for some kind of deal, lesser charge, sentence, something around the murder of Ana Walsh. So this is the decision moment for both sides. And tonight we're going to walk through what those two paths are, plea deal or a full trial, and why each side might be willing to go one way or the other. At this stage, absolutely nothing that's being done is accidental. Walsh made a very calculated choice. Now the prosecutor has to decide whether to negotiate or whether to push this all the way to a verdict. So the real question is whether this strategy gets Brian Walsh something or whether it backs him into a trial that he cannot afford to lose. So let's look at the pressure points. We're going to look at the risk shaping the next step for both sides. I want to say a special shout out to the first five in tonight's chat: Bama Queen, Betsy Sue, Pascaline, Michelle B, and dial M for Mildred. If y'all remind me, I have an opinion. I saw a lot of you were concerned about the numbers at the end of your names. So remind me, and I'll talk a minute about that. I have an idea on that, why that might be happening, because it happened to me at one point, and I can tell you what I did. So remind me at the end when we go for questions. Also, would you please hit the like button? That helps YouTube know we're here, we're around. It gets the video out to more people. And if you are not subscribed, we would really like to have you back for more videos. So please join us by hitting the subscribe button. Okay, so path A, a plea deal. Now, why would either side do it? And maybe it's the most obvious for Brian Walsh because it's a chance for him of getting out. If he is convicted of first-degree murder in Massachusetts, he will never get out of prison ever. Not happening ever. If he only has second-degree murder, then maybe he could have parole after 15, 25 years. Maybe tacked on to that would be some for the other charges, but he has a shot at it. So he probably will never see his mother outside of prison again, but it's a chance to maybe see his children, maybe meet his grandchildren outside of prison. So for him, it's pretty obvious in general why he would want that. He at least has a shot at something better than what is likely coming. And that's point two for me, is that the evidence against him is pretty overwhelming. Now, I was going to preview a timeline that I've been doing on this case. The timeline, I think we really enjoy timelines here on the channel. I think you'll like it. And I've been working on a timeline for Brian Walsh's case. It is really damning for him. And I'll go over a few things, but I'm not going to share my screen for this reason. For those of you who follow the channel, you know that at certain points in the stream, I've been going blurry. Well, according to ChatGPT and what I've been working on, we think it's StreamYard. So I'm going to be trying something different. I tried upgrading StreamYard. That did not make the difference. Apparently, it just can no longer handle when you try to share a screen. It just downgrades you and it can't fix that. It can't get its mojo back. It's done. So I'm going to be trying something different, but I don't want to do that tonight because I'm still on StreamYard and I don't want to have that happen to us. So I will just tell you what are some of the entries on my timeline. So the text messages that Brian Walsh Googled in the early morning of January 1st are probably the most important and impactful evidence in the entire case. Things like 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. Like, I don't know why he added if you really need to. I mean, wouldn't just disposing of a dead body be enough? I mean, isn't anyone harboring a dead body probably really needing to get rid of it? But in any event, he apparently added if you really need to. So I don't know if that gave Google a little extra urgency, but maybe it did. But there's just almost no way to explain that. It's really difficult to move around that. And it's not even close to all he had. How long for someone to be missing to inherit? Now, she's not even missing that anyone in the world knows. And he later is going to claim he didn't know she was missing. He thought she was at work. And so why is he worried about someone being missing and inheriting? And then how long before a body starts to smell? Just really gruesome, horrifying things that give you an image and a picture of what was happening. That is not good for Brian Walsh and bodes very ill for trial. There's also video surveillance, apparently, of Brian going to his mother's house and then leaving there, he said, to run errands. He said he was going to Whole Foods and CVS to help her out. But the video, apparently, from Whole Foods and CVS does not show him going. Instead, it does show that he went to a liquor store and went to a dumpster in the parking lot behind that and disposed of something. There was also evidence from a device that he apparently was using that tracked to Lowe's, and then investigators went and followed that, went to Lowe's and pulled surveillance video that showed Brian Walsh purchasing things like 5-gallon buckets and a hacksaw and terry cloth towels, a Tyvek suit, trash bags, cleaning products, things like that. And there was also video similarly of him at CVS. I guess he did go to CVS, but he was purchasing 13 different types of hydrogen peroxide. Again, it's really hard to explain that, to come up with some reason that's not related to the disappearance of his wife that explains that. And then there are things like more Google searches, hacksaw best tool to dismember. Why? Why is that being searched? How is he going to explain that? Can you identify a body with broken teeth? Just, it's not going to really be possible. There's another trip to Home Depot. This time he's wearing a surgical mask and gloves, and he buys $450 worth of cleaning supplies. And then yet more Google searches on the 3rd, 2 days afterwards, like, what is the rate of decomposition of a body found in a plastic bag? And things like that, that just are not going to be good in front of the jury. Those are the kinds of evidence that the state has said it has. None of this, and let me be really clear on this, none of this really constitutes evidence yet because it hasn't been admitted at a trial. So it's not actual admitted evidence that can be used to convict him. But the state says it has all of this and that it is going to bring that, it's going to put that in at trial, and they believe they are going to convict Brian Walsh. So getting back to our point, which is, why would Brian Walsh want a deal? In addition to the fact that this is his only shot at getting out, it's that the evidence is overwhelming. It's that what you just heard is just the tip of the iceberg, and it's brutal. It's really, really going to be hard for him to work his way out of this. So and that kind of leads into the next point I want to make, which is cross-examination of him is going to be absolutely horrible. Now, I would have guessed he would not take the stand because the evidence is so overwhelming. But in this case, if what he's hoping to do is to take the fact that he's admitted to disposing of the body and he's admitted to lying to police and say, here's what happened. It was all a big accident and I panicked. I just panicked and I didn't know what to do. I was on probation because of a federal violation. I thought I'm going to go to jail and I just disposed of the body and I shouldn't have done that and I should have told the truth, but it was just an accident. I didn't murder her. If that's what he's going to say, he has to be the one to say it. There's no one else who can say that. There's literally no one else who can say Brian Walsh was accidentally found his wife other than Brian Walsh. And so he has to be the one to show up, which means he has to face cross-examination. And the amount of evidence here is going to make it really difficult for him to do that, for him to explain all of the things. Dial M for Mildred is paraphrasing Walsh. She says, just ignore those pieces of my wife. It is a brutal case. It is a really brutal case. Thank you, Dial for Mildred. I appreciate very much the super chat. All right. So the fourth thing, and I may be giving Brian Walsh too much credit here, and I'm going to admit that. But the fourth thing that I think is this would spare his children what is going to be a spectacle. They're young. I don't think anybody is going to plop them in front of the TV and let them watch this now. But that doesn't mean they won't watch it later when they get older. And it will be a spectacle laid out for everyone to see, including those children. And in addition to that, whether they testify or not, which it could be that one of them has important information that either they bring or someone who spoke to them brings, depending on how the rules of hearsay shake out around the testimony of a child. But that aside, even if there is no testimony of importance from any of the children, there's the implications, not only that he's admitted to doing this with his wife, disposing of her body and stuff, but there are also the fact that he used his son's iPad to do a lot of these searches. And there's just a creepy feeling to that, to the idea that the son's device that he probably used to play little childish games, I think he was maybe 5, that was used for these sort of gruesome searches. And it's just all of that is going to be laid out bare for people to see. So maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but I hope that he would want a deal to spare his children. I think too, he has, and this will be my 5th point, he has positive experience with plea deals because he got a really sweet deal in that federal art fraud case. And if the case goes, I'm going to cover that a little bit. It's an absolutely fascinating aside on this case. I think you'll be really interested in watching and learning a little bit about that art fraud case because that is wild. But he got a really sweet plea deal. So he may be thinking, hey, plea deals are pretty good. I did well with this last time. But why would the prosecution ever agree to a plea deal? Like, why not just push through first-degree murder? I'm not letting you off. Why would they do that? And I want to talk about, I gave you 5 reasons for him. I want to give you 5 reasons for the prosecution too. And this one is maybe not, it may be a little bit surprising. It's not directly related to Brian Walsh, but honestly, I think the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office cannot really afford a loss right now. They had a brutally difficult loss handed to them, not just once, but twice in the Karen Reed case. First with the hung jury and then with the out and out loss of the case. It shook the confidence the community would have in the local prosecutors. And it's expensive, right? Every time you try a case unsuccessfully, it costs a lot of money. It costs money for the court. It costs money for the jurors. It costs money for the prosecutors, the evidence, the experts. All of those things are expensive. Not to mention, of course, Karen Reed. She paid for her own attorneys, but often in many cases, there would be a payment for the attorneys for the defendant. And so all of those types of expenditures have to be borne by the prosecutors. Now, Karen Reed did pay for her own attorneys. I'm not suggesting that was included. But the whole thing was just egg on the face of the prosecutors. And they need a win. And this was a super easy win. And I say that because of the charges, the first 2 charges that he's already pled guilty to. I mean, you heard the text messages. How does he get out of disposing of her body? How does he get out of lied to the police? It would be difficult to get out of those 2 because the evidence was so strong. So at least they would have won 2, right? But now the plea deal takes those 2 off the table. And what's left is the first-degree murder. Anything less than first-degree murder risks looking kind of like another loss. So the second reason I think that the prosecution might is that despite the fact that I think it's a very strong case, it's also got, like any case, some proof problems. It's got difficulty, particularly proving intent. Now, as far as we know, there's not a lot of evidence leading up to the crime that has to do with his intent to kill his wife. There were no searches beforehand about killing her or anything like that. It was all after the fact, after prosecutors believed she was already dead. And as far as there were a few things about divorce and things like that, but that's not the same as what came after. It's not the same as murder. So there's not a lot of evidence of actual intent. And of course, with no body, nobody can say how it happened. There's not DNA evidence. There's not a bullet wound. There's not something really clear that can be traced and linked to a particular person. So then there's the fact that he may have this new panicked argument that what happened was she just happened to die. Who knows how? I don't know. I assume there would be some explanation. He panicked and he got rid of the body. I cannot see how that turns out to be a great argument for him, but it would have been impossible if he hadn't admitted the first 2 things. I mean, if he hadn't admitted there was a body, it's impossible to say she died, right? I mean, he has to sort of pick and choose where he's going to pick his battles. He has to choose those. So the proof that he disposed of the body was the same as the proof that he was lying to the jury, to the police. And so the proof that he because he told the police that I didn't do this. This didn't happen to me. So he's managed now to successfully separate the murder from the charges that the best evidence was for, because the evidence was definitely pretty clear around disposing of the body. And he's admitted that now. Yep, I did that. Yep, I lied to the police. So if the jury decides, even one juror, right? And that's point number 3, you cannot predict the jury. You absolutely cannot. There is no such thing as a completely safe case. These are 12 complete strangers, and you do not know who they are or what agendas they bring in to a trial. So there is always, for every lawyer in every case, a fear of a holdout juror, for example, one juror who's maybe less sympathetic. And when you think about it, in this particular case, there's a lot less pressure on the jury to do something because he's already agreed he's guilty on 2 things. And they'll be told, don't worry about that. Pull that to the side, assuming it comes in, which I think it will. Then at this point, you just can't predict what the jury will do. And you particularly can't predict what all 12 of them will do. And so between those 2 things, some difficulties proving intent, there may be someone on the jury who says, I can see he did all this stuff afterwards, but I just don't see where the state proved that he intended this. Like, where's there evidence of that? I can see some jurors saying that. And so they're going to be a little bit worried about that. Reason number 4 is Michael Proctor, the lead detective in the Karen Reed case, highly, highly discredited. He was investigated by the feds. He's now been fired. It was brutal for the Commonwealth during the Karen Reed case. And it's going to be tough again in this case because he did so many things that were inappropriate. In Karen Reed's case, there were these wildly inappropriate text messages about Karen Reed. Now, there are not too many cases left, I think, that he was lead detective in, and the Commonwealth is going to have to work through. But they may just want to get this over with, get all the Michael Proctor cases gone. And then the last thing I want to mention as a reason for them is that in the end, the result may be pretty similar. It may not be all that different. I mean, for example, if he gets 25 years in prison for the murder and tacked onto that another 15, say, for the other charges, 40 years, even with some time off for good behavior. He's in his 50s, I think early 50s. So he's getting out at what, 80? How different is that? How likely is he to really get out? Is it really meaningful? And the prosecution is going to have to wrestle with that. Is it going to help them? Is it going to meaningfully change the result for Brian Walsh if they push this through to trial? But now let's take it the other way too. Let's talk about the reasons they might want to push for trial. And I have only 2 for Brian. I think there are fewer for him. 3, I should say. But I have a full 5 for the prosecution again. So for Brian Walsh, I think he may harbor hopes that he's going to be able to keep out some evidence, especially now that he has these in his pocket. Maybe he'll be able to keep the judge from letting those text messages in, things like that. I don't see that working. Pretty much all of that also goes to the issues around the murder, like consciousness of guilt, like intent, like motive. All of those things are going to be, I think, relevant in the case. I don't think he's getting out of it, but maybe he's thinking that. And maybe, it's point 2, he's thinking, maybe I can hook one juror. I can convince at least one juror, especially if I keep out some evidence. I can get somebody to agree that I didn't intend it, that it was just an accident. Maybe I can convince him of that. The third thing is, of course, he has very little to lose because I think there is so little meaningful difference between the sentence that he will get for second-degree murder plus the other charges and first-degree murder. In the end, it probably will make no difference to him. So let's look at the prosecution then. What are the prosecution reasons why they might want to push through to trial? Number 1 is it's a strong case and it deserves it. They may feel like this argument, he didn't just kill Ana Walsh, he made sure her children never had a grave to visit. And that is an appalling and moving point. I think the jury will resonate with that. The second is there's just a lot of public attention around this case, partly because of Proctor and partly because of the case itself. And the prosecutor's office is certainly not going to want to set a bad example of being soft on crime. They're not going to want to look like that. They're also not going to want to set the example that if you hide the body well enough, you can get second-degree murder instead of first, or you can get away with crime. They don't want that to be the public perception. And third thing is this actually has some international implications because Ana is from Serbia. And in interviews, some of her family members, friends have said it's being followed very closely there. So they're watching how do Americans handle a case in which someone from Serbia is murdered in the United States? How are we going to handle that? That puts some additional pressure on the prosecutors to look carefully at how they plead out or deal with the case. The fourth reason I can think that they might want to push to trial, that the prosecutors might, is it's a chance for redemption after Karen Read. This is a serious crime with a ton of evidence. There's no such thing as 100% sure win, but this is as close as it maybe gets in the legal field. Maybe the intent is a little murky, but in general, this is a really strong case. And so they may be thinking, here's their chance to show the world that they can convict a criminal. Karen Read was an aberration, just something different. And the fifth thing I can think that might put some pressure on them to move to trial is if the family has something to say about it. If the family is pushing them to get justice, maybe Ana's family is saying, we don't think a plea deal is appropriate. We think life in prison is the minimum, something along those lines. So we got at this point the immovable object and the unstoppable force, I think. It's going to be hard to make this choice. The prosecution is going to want something more than just second-degree murder. If Brian has anything more to offer, I think he's got a good chance at getting a plea. I would say, for example, if he could disclose of where the body is, that would be something that could buy a second degree for him. But the prosecution doesn't believe, I don't think, that there is a body. They think that the pieces or something was disposed into those trash cans, and all of that has been incinerated. So he doesn't have that to offer. I don't think there isn't something that he can turn over to them or tell them where it is or dig here. He doesn't have that. And without that, something more, my guess is that we proceed to trial, that the reasons to push forward to trial are going to be stronger for the prosecution. We are going to be following the case here on the Lawyerly channel. So please, if you aren't yet subscribed, subscribe. If you haven't hit the like button, would you please do that with the video? And let's take a few questions. Let me head over here and see that. And I remember it on my own. Okay, that I was going to tell y'all about the numbers that have suddenly appeared at the end of your name. So here's what happened to me. I don't know if this is what's happening again, but there was a point at which for creators, they introduced a messaging system where you could message using someone's name. And they gave you the name of your channel, and then they just added miscellaneous numbers at the end. I'm like, how many, at the time, I think I was still the Harvard Lawyer Lee channel. I'm like, how many Harvard Lawyer Lees can there be on YouTube? Why do I have to have this number? So anyway, I got it. I just removed that, and they gave you a chance to pick your name. So I forget, but you click on it and you were allowed to select the name you want. So even if they added a bunch of stuff at the end or changed it, you might have a chance to pick your own name. So go in and see if that's an option for you. So that's my only suggestion, because that did happen to me. Okay, so all right, Annie K. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody. I think I got it. Okay. How do you think his 2 new pleas will be revealed to a jury? They can't be kept out. So will they be revealed as part of the defense's opening? I think it depends on what the defense does with it, I think. If the defense says, if their point in doing this was to say, Look, the guy came forward, he did the best he could. Yeah, he really screwed up. He panicked. He did everything wrong for quite some time. He's sorry about that. He's admitted it. He's taking responsibility, but he did not actually kill her. I don't know, something they'll think of, overdosed or did something that caused her own death, or somehow it was an accident. And he didn't mean to. There's no intent here. There's no first degree murder, any of those things. If that's the way the defense argues it, it 100% comes in, I think. And if he gets on the stand to testify, I think it comes in as cross-examination of him. But in general, you don't always get in prior convictions other than just as maybe if it has to do with truth, which the one to the police would, then you would be able to get that in to just as very briefly, usually to say there had been a conviction for a crime of moral turpitude, it's called, or telling the truth. And you would get it in that way. I actually it's really interesting that you asked that, Annie K, because I had a long debate with ChatGPT about that today. I was like, I don't see any way that stays out. I just can't. ChatGPT was like, well, it might not come in. I'm like, what? It's coming in. There's no way that stays. I mean, how do you argue the case without including the plea deal, without including what he said to police, without including the places that they looked and why they looked there? I cannot imagine it not coming in. And Chat was finally like, yeah, well, it seems like pretty much any way they go, it's going to come in. So I think it's in. I'm with you on that. As far as to how it will be revealed to a jury, I think the defense is going to do it in opening statements, but that will depend a lot on what exactly their strategy is, because they haven't up until now been arguing that way. And so it was a surprise to everybody. I don't know that anyone knows this for absolutely sure. Okay. Do you think Catherine Lynn is asking a really good question? Do you think he will be likable enough to testify? It's and there's the problem, right? Because not only is it going to be difficult for him to be likable enough to testify, but you're going to pile on top of that, lied to the police, misled them, tried to get them going in the wrong direction. And the prosecution then wants to say, we'll see if this comes in, that gave him enough time to get everything disposed of, and it got taken to the incineration, and now it's gone. That gave him time to permanently dispose of the evidence. It was all intentional. And then he's going to have to say, yes, and I admitted to disposing of the body. I've admitted to that. I do not think he can be likable enough to testify in a way that changes the way the jury feels. I think that the jury will have made up its mind early on based on things like those text messages. And no, I don't think he's going to be likable enough to testify. Yes. Likable enough to convince the jury, persuade the jury, make a difference on his own behalf. No, I don't think so. I think that's going to be a real hard thing for him to do. But I'm telling you, this is going to be an absolutely incredible trial. He obviously has very talented, very strategic lawyers who are making choices to try to figure out how to best represent their client. So I will look forward to seeing what happens. Bon RPH is asking, well, how much could former Trooper Proctor influence this case? Does this help Brian Walsh, especially since he was the primary investigator and is now disgraced? Yes, I think it does help Brian Walsh. Anybody who has a case where Proctor was a key part of the investigation is going to have some new arguments that they wouldn't have had otherwise. But how far he'll be able to take that, I don't know, because in Karen Reed's case, that it was the failure to investigate. But here, they did investigate and they found more and more and more. Now, they never found her body, but their argument is that's because he was busy doing all he could to prevent us from finding it. And he finally succeeded in that by a combination of lying to us and then making sure the body was gone. So I think it will influence the case. I think it's going to be an important point that the defense will argue, but I don't think they're going to have nearly the evidence that Karen Reed did to connect Trooper Proctor to this case and Trooper Proctor to a desire to influence this case in a way that was inappropriate, which is what they had in Karen Reed's case. Nani Ann says, ChatGPT is not a lawyer. That is true, but it will argue with you. So there is that. It is kind of fun to argue with. I'm like, oh, that's not right. You're wrong on that. And it is, I must say, I really do enjoy it. It's like having a colleague you can argue a case with. I really have enjoyed that. But you're absolutely right, Nani Ann. ChatGPT is not a lawyer. They have had it pass the bar, is what I've heard, pass, or at least law school exams. So I guess there's, it's learning. S. Cipher wants to know, can Proctor be punished for screwing up cases? I think he has been, in the sense that he was fired. And I think there are other consequences for him as well. I think he's also been sued by certain people. So I think he has been punished. There may be even more to come. But yes, it's a real problem that he created for the Commonwealth, because when he acted inappropriately, he damaged the credibility as they try to convict people who are possibly real criminals who actually committed crimes. But it's difficult to convict them because of Trooper Proctor and what he did. So huge problem. All right. I think that does it. I think we've answered our questions. Let me go over what we're going to do next week, schedule-wise, because it's Thanksgiving. And may I say, I am super thankful for all of you, and I am really appreciative that y'all come and you watch, and it is just a blessing to be able to do this, and I'm grateful for all of you. So here's the plan for next week. I am going to drop a video on that will probably be an actual video, not a live stream. I'm also going to have a members only live stream on Monday night, and we're going to be working on the timeline for the Brian Walshe case. I'm going to run through it with you. And if you have some more things, we're going to add them in, make some changes, that kind of thing. So we're going to work together on the timeline. And then the timeline is going to be presented by video on probably Sunday night. So between Monday and Sunday, I probably won't be posting. But on Sunday, right before Brian's trial starts on Monday, assuming it does. Now, if the trial doesn't happen, if the trial is going to be canceled, if they're going to reach a plea deal and they announce that, well, then I won't go live on Sunday night. But if possible, I plan to go live on Sunday night and go through the timeline. And that way we'll be all ready to go with what we can expect and what to know moving forward in the Brian Walshe trial. So that's the plan for next week, Monday and then Sunday, and a members only on Monday night for working on the timeline. So I will look forward to seeing you all next week, and have a happy Thanksgiving.